Okay, so to draw a vector path, we're going to come down on the left side of the toolbar, and underneath this black arrow, that by the way is called the selection tool it's the vector selection tool. Underneath that, you're going to see something that looks like a shape. If you click and hold, you get to select your shape. I'm going to choose the ellipse tool because we're going to draw a circle. And the first thing that you want to do first is make sure that up here it's set to shape, up here meaning in the option panel. Make sure it's not path or pixels, make sure it's set to shape. And then I'm going to turn the fill off, so make sure that it's this strike through. That means it won't have a fill. And then we're going to choose black for the stroke. You can click on it and then choose it from the eyedropper here. And we'll just leave it at 1 pixel for right now. That's fine. So I'm going to find what looks sort of like the center of the dog. And I'm going to click, and I'm holding my mouse down, and then I'm going to select Shift and Option. All right, so I'm clicking and holding, and then I added the Shift and Option key, and while all of those things are held down, I'm going to start to drag out. And what that does is that Shift will constrain it so that it's a perfect circle. Option will make sure that it draws it from the center. Now, the trick to doing this is that you're going to want to release the mouse first. Don't release the keys, release the mouse first, and then you can release the keys, okay? And that's important because you want to make sure that it stays drawing from the center and constrained into a perfect circle. And so it doesn't look perfectly centered, and that's fine, because what I can do is I can come over here and select this black arrow tool in the tools panel, and then I can either grab it and move it like so, or the other thing that I can do too is if I just want to use my arrow keys, I can nudge it in any given direction. And so I think that that's probably about where I'd want it. And let's just call this circle over here instead of ellipse. I just renamed the path. And now what I can do is I can take my text tool over in the left tool panel, and we're going to add some text. Now, don't just immediately start typing. I want you to look up here in the option panel. First thing is you can choose left justified, center, or right justified. We want center because we want to be able to have this centered, and you need to choose center so that we can start typing from like the center point up here, and it'll center it. The other thing is you're going to choose your typeface. I'm choosing Bowlby1, Bowlby, and then the word 1, and it's regular. It's going to be a heavy face. You can choose something else if you wish, but if you want to follow the way it looks, then you can choose the same thing. And then I'm going to do mine at about 140 points. We can adjust that later if we want. All right, so the trick is I'm going to, whenever I come up here, we're going to zoom in a little bit, and you see the way that my text tool looks right now. There's a sort of a square around it. You don't want it to look like that. If I put it inside the circle, you get a circle shape, which means that it's going to fill the circle and conform to the circle shape. I don't want that either. I want it to get this path shape. It's sort of like almost like a tilde kind of shape, or like a little wave. And so you want to, while you've got the wave shape on your cursor, you want to click right here on this top center anchor point. And what that does is it puts in some lorem ipsum, and if you click away, then it's going to keep that. But if you don't click away and you just start typing, then it will replace your lorem ipsum, it's dummy text, with something else. So I'm going to call this Pampered, and I'm doing uppercase, Pampered Pet, and then I'll say organics. All right, and then that puts it about halfway around. I could make this a little bigger. Let's see what it looks like at about 150 points. Oops, I need to actually select everything, so I sort of double clicked all of this, or triple clicked it, and it selected everything. Let's try that at 150 points, and you know, that might work. And then if I click off of it, just clicking something else, then that clicks away from it. All right, so now we've got our type, which is great. And the other thing that's kind of cool, right, is that it's a little different from like Illustrator, if you've ever used Adobe Illustrator, is that now if I go back to my black selection tool, you'll see over here in the layers panel, you'll see that the text is separate from that circle. Like in Illustrator, whenever you type on a path, it transforms that that shape into your text path and you can't use that shape anymore. But in Photoshop, it doesn't do that. It's kind of nice. You can still use the circle as a circle if we want, and we're going to do that later. But for right now, I want to put some grass down here. All right, and so I'm going to tell you to go up here to File, and then you're going to go to Place. You can either do Linked or Embedded. For right now, we're going to stick to Embedded. It's a little bit simpler. This tutorial is very short, so we're not getting into smart objects. So we're going to place Embedded. And we're going to look in that same PS demo start folder, and we're going to choose this grass.png file, and we're going to come down and we're going to drag this down and get it to a point where we would actually want it to be with the dog. And I can probably make this smaller if I click and drag it. If I hold down Option, it'll scale from the center. All right, and then I can also nudge it with my arrow keys and move it down. I think that I want to keep making it a little smaller yet. Let's keep moving it down. I'm not going to nudge it. I'm just going to drag it down. And I think it could probably actually be a little bit bigger now. So I'm going to hold down Option so it scales up from the center, and I'll nudge it up. If I hold my Shift key while I hit my arrow keys, then it actually moves it, and I think it's like ×5, like moves it more steps. Let's make it a little bit bigger. All right, and I also want to be sure that I'm keeping it inside of the circle, and right now I don't know if you can tell, but see there's this line down here, so I'm going to just pull it down so that it's going to be encapsulated inside that circle. So I think that I'll be all right with this. And then if I want to commit to that, I just hit the Enter or Return key, and we're good to go. Now the other thing that I can do is if I take this grass layer that's over here and I drag it down so that it is underneath the dog, look what happens. That threshold, remember this threshold adjustment layer that we had? It applies that to the grass, which is awesome. That's perfect. That's exactly what I want to have happen. And so the next thing that I can do now is that I can take this circle, right? This is really great because this is the circle that I used before for my text path. So if I decide, like, let's say that I want to have a border around this and I want to also be able to make it so that this grass is masked inside of there, then what I can do is I can make the circle bigger, right? And because it's separated from the text path, unlike it would be, say, in Adobe Illustrator, if you're familiar with that, I am not going to adjust my text whenever I adjust the circle. So what I can do is select the circle in the Layers panel, and then with the black selection tool over here in the Tools panel, I can actually make sure that the circle is selected. And you'll see the anchor points pop up on whenever you select it. And now if I go and I do, on a Mac it would be Command T, on Windows it would be Control T, it goes into free transform mode, right? And now what I can do is I can scale it larger. I need to make sure that I'm scaling it from the center outward though. So I'm going to click this corner, one of the corners, and I'm going to hold down Option key and drag it out, and also the Shift key to make sure that it stays constrained. And I'm going to maybe make it about that big, I think. That's maybe a good place for it. Now, the one thing that you'll notice is that the grass is no longer contained, so we'll have to adjust the grass a little bit again, right? We were adjusting it based on the other circle, but I think that I want to make it a little bit bigger now to fit inside of this. But now what I can do is I can take this circle and I can do a couple of things, right? One is that I can give it a border, all right? And so if we want to go ahead and commit to this, then I can hit the return key. And so I've committed to making that change. So now to change the border, I can come up here to where it says stroke, and then I could see what it looks like with a larger border, right? And so you can do that, but for right now, I think I'm going to just keep it at 1 pixel for the moment, and I'm going to show you something else that you can do that's kind of cool too. But I'm going to make the grass so that it fits nicely inside of this. So I'm going to select the grass layer, and we're going to free transform the grass. So while the grass layer is selected, I'll do Command T again, and then I'm going to scale it holding down the Option key so it scales from the center. And then I think that that's probably going to be about right. Okay, because it looks like it's covered down below and it goes all the way out to the edges here. So I'll hit return, and now we've committed to that. So if I go back to the circle again, let's revisit this. What's really cool is if I want to add a mask to that grass, I can use this circle as the basis for my mask, which is cool. So while you've got this vector path selected, what you want to do is go over here to where it says paths. And if that's not showing for some reason, like if you closed it, you can always go up to window and choose paths, okay? And then down below, you're gonna see right about here, there's this little dotted circle. And what that will do is it will convert this, it'll make a pixel-based selection out of your vector-based selection, and it doesn't get rid of the circle, right? So you see in my layers, the circle's still there. It's a vector circle because it's got this little vector shape in the thumbnail picture. And so this is now a regular selection. So if I wanted to go down to grass, the grass layer, while my regular selection is chosen, I can just click this mask layer or this mask icon, and I added a mask to it. And so now I've got that masked, which is cool. And now if I want to go to circle, right, I can go to the circle layer, I can select my vector shape, and now I can increase the border, right? So that you can make it, obviously that's crazy, right? But if you wanted to give it like a little bit more weight, you can do that. Okay, and so now we've got our basic mark, and then you could use this to export out as a logo, or create a sticker or something like that that you could apply to something. And if you wanted to go to the extra mile and add like a gradient in the background, if you wanted something to have color, you could do that. The challenge that you would have at this point, though, is that you've got this threshold and it doesn't have any kind of mask on it to only threshold certain things. It's just thresholding everything. So it's going to do that black thing, right, where it just makes everything dark. So what you would need to do is, with the way that we have this organized, one of the things that you could do anyway, is you could take all of these. If you hold down the shift key and you select all three of these layers, let's put this in a group by clicking this folder, and we will call this threshold group, like that. Okay, and I can duplicate this. I'm gonna just to be careful, I'm going to duplicate this by dragging it to this little new layer icon, and it duplicates my whole group. And I'm going to take my original group and I'm going to click this lock button and lock it so that I can't change it, and I'll turn off the visibility of it as well. And what I'm going to do to the threshold group copy is I'm going to take all three of these layers, I'm going to right click, and I'm going to say merge. All right, and I'm going to say merge layers, and what that does is it turns it into a single layer, and then I don't have to worry about the threshold filter anymore. And I've turned off the visibility of this one that's down here, and so that way, and actually this doesn't even have to be inside of a group anymore, right? If I wanted to get rid of it, I could, but I'm just going to rename this, and I'll call this simple, simple logo or simple silhouette or something like that. Okay, and then what I could do at this point, if I wanted, is I could find my gradient tool off to the left right here, and then if you double click your gradient, you can pick your colors. I've already picked my colors, but to pick a color in the gradient, you would double click one of these bottom sliders, pick the color you want to originate with, and then same thing over here, you'd pick your other color. So let's say that we're going to choose this, sort of like a sunset to a sky color. And I'm going to choose a new layer. I'm going to make a brand new layer, and I'm going to draw a gradient. I could have also made an adjustment layer too. That's another option that I could have done. But I'm going to just kind of click right about here and hold my shift key so it constrains it, and then I've got this. And the problem is you look at this and you go, okay, well, wait a second. That is, it's on top. All you got to do is drag that layer down below, and we'll call this gradient. And there's some different ways that you could do this, by the way. And if I want to keep that maintained inside the circle, then all I need to do is grab my circle layer, and because it's technically still there, and I can actually go back to my paths, and where it says circle shape, all right, oh, actually I have to select it. I have to select it with my selection tool, okay? So I've got my black selection tool, I selected the shape, and I'm inside of paths, and if I click on this dotted line here, it's going to load the selection for me. which is nice. And then I can just go back down to my gradient and add a mask. And then boom, we've got color behind it. All right, so these are some simple steps that you can do to achieve this, all right? And what's cool is that using something like Adobe Dimension, you could actually go and very easily put this on, you know, three-dimensional bags or, you know, cups or boxes or things like that in real scenes so that you can have like a 3D mock-up of your stuff with product placement, okay? All right, thanks for watching.